All right. We started last week talking about the design process. In other words, how do you create a good, well-designed web page? And we said you do this by following a certain set of steps. And you don't just do these steps, but you document these steps. And a lot of students sometimes wonder, like, why can't I just go ahead and make the web page? Why do I have to go through these extra steps? So I thought I'd spend a minute talking about that. There's a number of reasons that you go through these steps. First of all, and again, the bigger the project, the more these steps become important. First of all, almost any activity that you do is best if you spend some time planning. Any big activity anyhow, like making a website or writing a term paper.
Power on.
Or planning a trip.
Bluetooth mode.
Okay, I don't know what's going on, but I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay? Someone could type in the chat. Okay, good. Any activity that you do, planning a trip, writing a term paper, buying a new car, any big activity is best if you plan it, not shoot from the hip, as they say, not just go out there and make, spontaneous, decisions. So it's best to plan things out, especially the bigger the project gets to be. Secondly, you may be involved with a team of people. Now, in this particular assignment for your semester project, you're working on it on your own, right? But think about if you're working on a real project. You might be working with a team of people. You might have other software developers, other web developers that you're working with. You might have the people from the other company, the people that you're building the website for, and so on. So it's best to communicate with people before you actually start working on the site itself. And the more that you can keep good lines of communication, the better chance that you're going to develop a website that works for everyone. All right. There's a very famous graph in all of software development that looks like this. And what it graphs is it shows the cost to make a change to some piece of software, including a website, versus the stage that you're at. And the graph looks like this. It's a curve that actually curves upwards. And what this means is the farther along the stage that you get, greater the cost is. So if you're just in the planning stages down here, if there's an oversight, it doesn't take a lot of time, money, whatever to correct it. It's pretty easy to correct it. If you already have your website in production, then an oversight can cost a lot to correct. And again, the larger that a project gets, the more this is true. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some time to plan our website before we actually do it. And I'm sort of playing the role of the other people on the project because you need to communicate to me what your website is going to be so that I understand it, so that I can see whether I think it will be a good project or not, or whether you've missed things. Okay. Last time we went over the first two stages of the project. And again, these stages would be done in a Word document. The first stage is the strategy stage, where you define the goals for your site. Why are you creating the site? All right, and please don't tell me you're creating the site to get an A in this class. Pretend that you're actually creating the site for real. And why would you create this site for your hypothetical organization or your hypothetical situation? Then you're to identify 3 user personas. And personas are sort of sample users. And you actually give them names and you describe what group of users they represent. And you define 3 different goals for each of them, or 3 goals for each of them. Now, there can be some overlap, right? If you were doing a restaurant, the example we gave last time, we gave a bunch of examples. I don't remember specifically which ones we did last time, but we said that one of your personas might be a person with dietary restrictions, whether it be a food allergy or whatever. Another group might be a couple looking at a place to go on a date. And a third persona might be a family interested in taking the family out for some sort of celebration. Now, these are groups of people that will have similar but different goals. And in developing a website, you want to address the most common users that you're going to deal with and the most common goals that those users have. So, in this section, you describe the site's topic or purpose. You create your 3 user personas. You give a list of why you are creating this project. In other words, putting yourself in shoes of the organization that's actually creating this project. A prioritized list of 3 user goals for each persona. So that's a total of 9 user goals. And it should look professional. Do it in Word, and it should look like a report that you'd give your boss. All right. User persona should be on a separate page, have an actual photo. Say where you got the photo. Now, when I say it's not merely a list of the things required, you certainly can use lists when you're preparing this, but you'd write a little paragraph explaining what the list means. For example, you'd say, these are the goals that our organization has for creating this website. And then you have a list of 3 items. These are the goals for the persona of the person that has dietary restrictions. And you list out the 3 goals and so on. Should look professional. So, before you do it, you need to understand why you're doing it. You need to understand what goals you're solving, because if you remember from our discussion last week, a web page is successful if it satisfies the goals both of the organization and of the people that visit the site. If it doesn't satisfy the goals, then it's not a very successful website. So you've defined these goals. Now, what things are you going to put on the page that will help achieve those goals? So, for example, a goal of a person with dietary restrictions might be, does the restaurant have a good variety of choices for someone who is lactose intolerant, or who has a gluten allergy, or who is a vegetarian, or who eats kosher or halal, or whatever? So that might be one of your personas. What are some things that you can put on the site? Well, you could put on the site a description of the ingredients used. You could put little indications whether a dish is a vegetarian dish, whether it's kosher or halal, whether it contains certain allergens, certain common allergens, and so on. So the goal would be to find out if the restaurant serves a variety of dishes that meet my dietary restrictions. Requirement would be a list of the dishes that the restaurant does serve, along with some comment about the ingredients in it and whether it meets certain dietary restrictions or not. A goal of some user might be, is the restaurant affordable? Well, show the prices. You know, for each dish, we'll show the prices. We'll show the prices for the main course, for the appetizers, for desserts, and so on. That way a person can look and decide, what does affordable mean? Affordable for one person means something very different than for another person. So if you actually put the prices on the page of the meals, that will help each person decide, is the meal affordable, and so on. It's important to see the difference between these two. The strategy relates to what the organization and the users want to achieve with this site. The scope relates to what are we going to put on pages that are going to help the users achieve their goals. So they're related, but they're not the same thing. You know, a goal might be, does the restaurant have, the kind of ambiance that we're looking for? What's the decor like? Is it a good place to take someone on a date, or is it more of a family-friendly environment where, that isn't necessarily suitable for a couple on a date? Well, you could show photos of it, and that would help users decide if it's suitable. So what you want to achieve is defined in the strategy section. How you're going to achieve it is defined in the scope section. Now, every goal you define should be addressed by at least one requirement. If you define something as your goal, why would you have a website that didn't have anything on it to achieve that goal? So if you say, determining if the restaurant is affordable, what if you had nothing on the site that related to the prices? You've defined a goal and you didn't put anything on the site that helps the users achieve that goal. That doesn't make sense. So every goal should be addressed by your requirements, at least one requirement per goal. My guess would be that there'd be 50 or 20 well-worded, detailed requirements. On the other hand, don't make your project too big. Feel free to change requirements. But if you change requirements, you should change your design document. There is no need to define a requirement as the basics of good web design. In other words, you should not put as a requirement, the site should have good navigation. Of course, the site should have good navigation. That's what making a good website entails. That's one of the things that making a good website entails. So you wouldn't say that, as a requirement. That's assumed. Your website should be accessible. In other words, people that have visual impairments or other impairments can access your site. Of course it should. Right? Your requirement should relate to the specific goals for the creation of your website, not just repeating what basic good web design is. Now, I know that all this is kind of subjective. I on occasion will get someone that will say, well, it's hard to tell exactly what you want. Well, I've done my best to define what I want, but if you have any questions, please feel free to send me drafts for review. So if you come up with your strategy and your scope, email it to me, and I'll be more than happy to take a look at it and let you know if you're in the right track, or you need more detail, or you need to be more specific, or you need more requirements, or your requirements don't really relate to the goals, or whatever. So feel free to contact me as far as that goes. Now there's three more sections of your design. First is a structure diagram. And a structure diagram looks like this. It's like a organizational chart, where you're going to say, I have a home page. From the home page, I can get to the breakfast menu, lunch menu, dinner menu, etc. These are the pages. So in the structure section, you define the pages that are going to be on your site. In the scope section, you define all these things that are going to be on your site. And you just listed them. Now, are you going to put everything on the same page? No, probably not. You're probably going to create and divide your content into different sections, different logical divisions of the content. And you're just going to, in the structure section, decide what those pages are and how they're going to be related to each other. Maybe, for example, on both the breakfast and lunch menu, there's a link to your weekend brunch menu, for example. Or maybe that's just off the home page. So you get to decide how you're going to break down your topic. Now, you could break it down a lot of different ways. I could, for example, alternatively, have a home page and have a page underneath it that has all the menus underneath it. It has a separate section for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and brunch. You have to come to the decision. Why would you do one way versus the other? And you should state, well, I could have put all the menus on one page, but I thought that would be a long, a big page, would take long to load, would take long for the user to scroll through. Or I put them all on the same page. That way a user can scroll through and see, should I go to this restaurant for lunch or dinner? And maybe compare what the specials are or things like of that nature. Any topic you have, you can define and you can break down a number of different ways. What I'm asking for you in this section is a diagram like this that describes how you're breaking down your topic into separate pages, and then a brief explanation of why you broke it down that way. Let's think of another example. Let's think of an example of a sporting goods store. Now, one option that you have your home page, and you could have pages off the home page for the brand. So you could have a Nike page, an Adidas page, Reebok page, and so on. Another thing you could do is break things down by sport. You could have your home page. You could have a page about golf, a page about basketball, a page about hockey, and so on. I'm sure we could easily come up with others. You could have a home page. You could have different page for adults versus children. And group all the children sporting equipment and sporting goods together versus all the adult sporting goods and apparel together. There's a lot of ways you could define it, and they all sort of make sense, right? What you have to do is look at your personas, look at what their goals are, and decide which one's the best. For example, you might say, and again, I'm not saying this is the correct answer, but you might say, well, when I look at my personas, there's personas for people that want to start a new sport. Well, if we did that, then maybe it makes sense to organize the content on the page by sport. So if someone wants to take up golfing, that way all the things that they'll need to start golfing will be on the same page. You know, golfing clothes, the golfing shoes, golf clubs, golf balls, and so on would all be on the same page. So maybe you would say, I chose this organization because that's what my personas seem to suggest would be the most useful. So when you come up with your structure of your website, you come up with that, but in addition, you explain what other options you considered and why you chose the option that you chose. All right. Notice how we're getting more and more specific. In the strategy section, we're talking about goals. In the scope section, we're talking about specific pieces of content. In the structure suggestion, we're talking about specific web pages. Our next section, we talk about specific layouts of a page. And maybe we do something like this. Our logo is in this corner. Our navigation is on this side. We have two columns of content. And then we have a footer. This is known as a wireframe. And if we look up wireframes online, we'll see examples of them. There's even a little web page that allows you to create wireframes. You can, by the way, sketch it out and just save a JPEG of it if you want. So you could sketch it out as long as it's legible in Paint or some other image processing tool. Worst case scenario, you could actually draw it on a sheet of paper and take a picture of it if you want. As long as it communicates, I'm not too picky on the format. But here's an example of a wireframe. In this wireframe, there's a product, some pictures of the product, some text about the product, and on the bottom, some tabs that show some different information about the product. So we might define, if we were the sporting goods store, we might say that, gee, all the pages for our products look like this. Right? If you think about it, if you visit a site like Amazon or whatever, you see that they have a template for most of their pages. In other words, all their product pages look about the same. If we were to look up, say, HTML books, and we pick that. Notice how it looks. On the side, there's a little box for you to purchase it. There's always a picture of the product, title of the product, information about it, frequently bought together, customers who viewed this also, products related to this, and more information. Maybe even some reviews of the product. There's also a navigation on the top. There's a search area. There's areas about your account if you were actually logged on. And at the bottom, there's a footer that contains a bunch of links to less common sites that you would want to, less common pages that you'd want to go to. Now, if I pick another product, notice the layout looks identical. So they have a wireframe for this. You know, their wireframe would look something like this. Search, account info, navigation, purchase info, picture of the product, information about the product, and again, if we had more space, we could draw in the rest of the stuff. Now, a page can have more than, or a site can have more than one wireframe. For example, the product pages on Amazon look different than the search result pages. So if we go back here, and do a search, the search looks a certain way. This is different than each product page looks like. But all the searches look particularly the same. So on Amazon, there might be a wireframe for the search results and a wireframe for the product page. And there might be a wireframe for other sections of the site as well. If we look at Loring Communities website, notice we have this header that's on the top of every page. We have this navigation that's on the top of every page. We have some content, and then we have a footer. We go to pages like this, there's a navigation, there's a picture, and there's two columns, a sub-navigation and information, and then a footer. So even though there's like a whole bunch of pages on Loring Community College's website, there may only be 2 or 3 wireframes. So it's not as though there's a wireframe for every page. There's a wireframe for every layout that you have on your site. So you're going to do, what did I say, 5 to 8 pages? You might be able to get by with just 1 wireframe. Or maybe you have 2 wireframes if you have a certain set of pages that you want to look different than other pages in terms of basic layout. Finally, the last step is a prototype. Let's look up to see what a prototype means. Prototype is a first typical or preliminary model of something. It can be a machine, but it can be a web page too. from which other forms are developed or copied. What does that mean? That means that you're going to make some sample pages for your website. There's an old saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words. We can describe what our page is going to look like and what our site's going to look like using lists of content and sketches of the organization of the site and so on. But when users are really going to understand what's going to be on the site is when they actually look at example pages. Now, example pages don't have to be complete. You don't have to have all the images, for example, that you're going to put in the final version, or all the text. You might use Greek text or placeholder text to say, here is where the product description is going to go. It doesn't need all the functionality that you're going to have. But a prototype should be complete enough so that anyone viewing the prototype has a good idea of what the final website's going to look like. Let's look at images of a prototype. Let's see what would be a good one. Here is a website for a cupcake place where you develop and design sort of a finished version of the page, but it doesn't have to be complete and perfect. But it's complete enough so that people can look at it and see what it's going to look like when it's completed. So maybe, like, for example, here, all these examples are using cupcakes. I don't know why. Here's an example of a prototype. Maybe if you were doing this website for cupcakes, maybe you wouldn't develop all of these cupcake flavors. Maybe you just develop the page for one of them. Because if I can look at this and say, yeah, I like the way this looks, then, well, I will assume I'll like the same format for chocolate cupcakes and lemon lilac cupcakes and so on down the line. So you don't have to develop all your web pages to give the user an idea of what the final site's going to look like. Just a sample of them would be enough. So maybe you would develop a homepage for this site, a cupcake flavor, and a contact us page. Maybe you just develop 3 pages, and that should be enough to give the user the idea of what the final site's going to look like. Now, you might actually develop several prototypes and give the user a choice. I've seen that done where, and again, if you think about it, what we've learned so far with CSS, it's easy for us to take the same HTML and apply different CSS to it. So we could actually mock up a couple different prototypes using CSS that the user could look like and say, yeah, I like this one better than that one. Or maybe I like the color scheme on the first prototype, but I like the fonts on the second prototype. And you could piece together. Remember, the whole idea of this is to find out what you need to do near the beginning of the project, because at that point, it is easier and less expensive to make the changes for. Now, starting next week, we're going to start talking about how we take our wireframes that we've sketched and turn them into prototypes. So our next section after today is going to be devoted to creating layouts with CSS. So far, we've used CSS for mainly just putting different colors on things and maybe changing the fonts and all that. In this, notice that the header's on the top, navigation's on the side, our main content areas here, and our footer's over here. Well, an alternate way to doing that would be have the navigation along the top and so on. We're going to look at how we can write our CSS to give us those different layouts of the page. What I would like to talk about now, though, with the remainder of today's class period, is your portfolio. Because your portfolio assignment, your first portfolio assignment is going to be due in like 2 weeks. We look at the portfolio assignment. First version of the portfolio, part 1, is due March 8th. So what is a portfolio? A portfolio can be done for a number of purposes. In the web world, often it's used as a way for web developers to showcase their skills. So let's Google web developer portfolio. At this one. Shoot. There'd be a link to it. Oh, there it is. Okay, notice we can get an idea of what this person's work is. We can see their graphic design. You can see a little bit of information about them. And you can see sample projects that they've worked on. Days of Poetry Gallery. Now keep in mind, I'm picking sort of high-end portfolios. I don't expect your portfolios to be this elaborate. But really what portfolios are they're a way of you to say a little bit about yourself and to showcase your work. So if I was going to sketch a wireframe for it, it would probably look something like this. We have a header. We have a paragraph about you. And then I'm going to have a list of projects. Some text about it. Lab 1. Lab 2. Lab 3. One thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go back into your projects that you turned in and create a link back to the portfolio homepage. Now, let's mock up a very quick portfolio with a couple of the assignments or a couple of the examples that we've done in this class. I'm going to download first week's example and the second week's example. So here's the first week's example. Download it and extract it. and the second week's example. Download it and extract it. I think I extracted it, yeah. No, I didn't. So here's my two folders. I'm going to keep each lab in its own folder. So I'm going to call this week 1. I'm going to copy this over and call it week 2. Now, each of these are going to have all the files that I need for it. So there's the files for week 1. Here's the files for week 2. Oh, they're shown over here. So I'm going to create my web page on the desktop. Now, in the interest of time, I have about 10 minutes left. I am not going to spend a lot of time making this look pretty, but you will. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to put my code in. Maybe here. I put a paragraph, info about me. And that should actually be some info about you. Then I have my nav section as a navigation to all of my labs. Now, this is going to be on the desktop. And the pages are going to be in different folders. That's the first time we've encountered that this semester. So we're going to make our links a little bit different. This page is on our desktop. So I'm going to save this as, on the desktop, I'm going to save it as portfolio.html. Now, where is lab 1? It's going to be a link, A equals href, but it's not on the desktop. Where is it? It's in a subfolder called week 1, and it's called first.html. So when I'm going down a folder, I put the name of the folder and then a slash. So I'm going to say week 1 slash first.html. Put my text, week 1 example. I'll do the same thing for week 2, except the folder is not week 1, it's called week 2. And the page is not called first, it's called index.html. You only have to link to one of your pages. You don't have to link to all of the pages if there's more than one. Now I'm going to save this. Now again, you're doing this. You're going to make this look really nice using all the CSS we've learned. Now I click on this. I forgot some tags. Got another LI. Click on that, I go to my week 1 example. Click on that, I go to my week 2 example. Now, I need to link back to the portfolio. So I'm going to have to go and change each one of my assignments. I'm going to edit that. I'm going to put a little link at the very top of the page. Or you could put it anywhere really, but. Now here I'm going to go up one folder. And when you go up a folder, that's represented by a dot dot. Slash, and then the name of the file. If any of you have had CISS2, no, not 2, 125, you use the dot dots the same way for this. Now you can go to Lab 1, and you go back to the portfolio. This is common. This is how we refer to different images. Images are in a different folder. We do the same way. We use either dot dot to go up a folder, or we use the name of the folder to go down to a folder. So if you wanted to have images in a folder called images, you would say image source equals image slash and the name of the image, instead of just the name of the image, which you would do. If you have any questions at all about this, please let me know or send me what you have so far. When you're done, you would zip up everything, portfolio, and all the folders for the class, and send to a compressed folder, and I'll be able to take that, decompress it, or uncompress it, or expand it, whatever the right word is, and be able to view your portfolio. All right, next week, the real fun in this class starts. We start playing around with layouts to make our pages really set up to be better designed pages and to more closely satisfy the needs of our users. Does anyone have any questions? All right, I will see you next week. I'll be in lab in a couple minutes.